You're the reason this family has problems, my parents declared at dinner. Everyone nodded. I nodded back. Then I became the reason they had housing problems by cutting off their rent payments. Sometimes, being the problem is the solution. I was 29 years old when my family finally dared to voice what they'd silently believed for decades. We were gathered around that formidable oak table in my parents' dining room, a silent witness to countless meals, birthdays, and an unending stream of passive-aggressive comments. The pretense for this familial assembly was Miranda's latest organizational triumph, Grandma Edith's upcoming 80th birthday party. What it actually devolved into, with chilling precision, was an intervention aimed squarely at me. My mother, Claudia, sealed her performance with a theatrical clink of her wine glass, then delivered the opening line of a play I never auditioned for. "Vivian, we need to talk about something serious." A cold dread began to curl in my stomach. Quentin, Miranda's insufferable husband, was actually here. This man, who usually materialized only for the most unavoidable holiday gatherings, sat radiating a smug satisfaction that had grated on my nerves for every one of his 6 years married to my sister. "What's going on?" I asked, genuinely confused. Then, a chilling departure from ritual. My father, Raymond, the perpetual echo of Claudia's will, cleared his throat. He, who never dared to open family discussions, now usurped the matriarch's role, his voice a low, brutal blow. "You're the reason this family has problems." His words hung, thick and acrid, in the stagnant air. I scanned the circle of faces, Miranda's slow, deliberate nod, her perfectly shellacked nails clicking a morbid rhythm against her glass, Quentin's smirk, now a full-blown grin of triumph, even Aunt Sylvia, an uninvited co-conspirator, her lips pursed in silent condemnation. My mother, Claudia, seamlessly picked up the thread of accusation. "We've been patient, sweetheart," she purred, her voice laced with manufactured weariness. "We've tried to be supportive, but your attitude, your choices, your constant need to defy the family mold, it's exhausting. You are a vortex of tension. Miranda's children notice it. Your grandmother notices it. We all do." A part of me screamed for rebellion, for the chance to unravel their hypocrisy, to expose the decades of marginalization that had shaped my very being. But another, colder part observed. And then, against every instinct, I nodded. "You're right," I stated, my voice barely a whisper. "I've been the problem." Their collective gasp was a symphony of stunned satisfaction, almost sweet enough to mask my humiliation. They had anticipated a theatrical confrontation, tears, accusations, a dramatic storm out. Instead, they received quiet compliance. "I'll do better," I added, hardening my resolve. "I promise." The oppressive tension in the room dissipated, a punctured balloon releasing its suffocating air. Miranda offered a genuine, surprised smile, a rare bloom directed at me. My mother's hand reached out, a gentle squeeze across the table. Even Raymond seemed to exhale a silent relief. They believed they had won. They had no earthly idea my agreement wasn't surrender. It was the meticulous construction of a long-awaited strategy. To truly grasp that moment, let me rewind, unspooling the long, tangled thread of how we arrived at that dining table. The chasm between my parents and me wasn't a recent rupture. It was a slow, agonizing fissure that began long before that fateful dinner. I was barely 11, Miranda 14, already being sculpted for the debutante ball, a ritual Claudia deemed paramount for proper social grooming. Weekends melted into a blur of etiquette lessons, dress fittings, and synchronized socialite practice for Miranda, surrounded by girls from appropriate families. 3 years later, when my turn theoretically arrived, no one bothered to ask if I wanted to participate. Claudia simply declared the tradition unsuited to my personality. Raymond, ever the obedient consort, echoed her sentiment, as he always did. My father wasn't a partner in our family's narrative. He was Claudia's meticulously tuned echo chamber, validating her every pronouncement with a nod or a soft, verbal assent, never once daring an independent thought. His closest approximation of defending me was a passive silence, a refusal to actively join the pile-on, yet an equally potent refusal to intervene. In a home where Claudia's pronouncements were divine law, His neutrality was, in essence, complicity. School, too, offered no sanctuary. Miranda, 2 grades my senior at the same private academy, cast a long, inescapable shadow. Teachers openly pitted us against each other. "Your sister was such a joy to have in class." They'd sigh, the unspoken corollary deafening. I was not. I was, at best, adequate, at worst, a perpetual disappointment, forever gauged against the benchmark I never consented to compete with. College, blessedly, offered a fleeting reprieve. Miranda's departure to a university 3 states away felt like the sudden, expansive gift of breathable air. I plunged into my studies, unearthing a dormant aptitude for logistics and systems management, graduating with honors that my parents acknowledged with a perfunctory card and a modest check. Miranda, in stark contrast, was fated with a lavish party, 70 guests, and a live band, a celebration that still rings in my ears. My first post-college role, an administrative position at a commercial real estate firm, was hardly glamorous, yet it proved profoundly educational. I devoured the mechanics of property ownership, leases, maintenance, tenant relations, regulatory compliance, absorbing every nuance from the ground up. 2 years in, I transitioned to a residential property management company, a move that promised advancement. Within 5, I was leading a team of 8. Within 8, I commanded regional director status, earning a salary that would have undoubtedly startled my parents, had they ever bothered to inquire. But they never did. Family discourse orbited exclusively around Miranda, her wedding, her home, her children's myriad achievements. When the spotlight, by some rare atmospheric fluke, swung my way, the questions were always cursory, swiftly dismissed. "Still working at that apartment place?" Claudia would ask, her gaze already drifting, seeking something, anything, more captivating. Growing up, Miranda wasn't merely an older sister. She was a looming shadow, an archetype of perfection in every dimension that mattered to our parents. It's common for younger siblings to navigate the wake of a high-achieving firstborn, but Miranda wasn't just accomplished, she was incandescent. Beautiful where I was plain, graceful where I was awkward, charming where I was quiet. She was the flawless embodiment of Claudia and Raymond's cherished values: social assent, impeccable appearances, and strategic matrimony. When she introduced Quentin during her junior year of college, my parents practically dissolved into tears of joy. The Reynolds family, owners of a flourishing real estate development company, offered Quentin a path to comfortable inheritance, if not outright fortune. Crucially, he hailed from good people, a euphemism in their lexicon for white-collar, country club adjacent, and perfectly ambitious. My own romantic dalliances, predictably, always fell short. The artist I dated in my early 20s provoked outright horror from my mother. The thoughtful nonprofit administrator I grew serious with in my mid-20s simply bored her. When I finally ceased bringing anyone home, it merely solidified their conviction of my fundamental defectiveness. Professionally, I meticulously carved out a niche that my family found an equal blend of mystifying and embarrassing. While Miranda glided into real estate wealth, dedicating herself to charity luncheons and interior design, I systematically built a robust career in property management. I oversaw residential rental properties across 3 states for a private investment firm. Unglamorous, perhaps, but my reliability and efficiency were undeniable. Over 8 years, I ascended from assistant property manager to regional director, managing a portfolio valued at approximately $40 million. My family never truly comprehended the scope of my work. They grasped vague notions of apartments and tenants, acknowledging it occasionally encroached on holiday gatherings. Claudia, at social functions, would introduce me as working in real estate, technically accurate, but implying a prestige far removed from the grid of my daily reality. What they didn't know, what I meticulously guarded for 3 years, was that their very home, the sanctuary they believed was their own, resided within the vast portfolio I managed. To truly unravel this, we must step back once more. In 2019, my parents acquired their current residence, downsizing from the sprawling 4-bedroom colonial where Miranda and I spent our formative years. They'd been temporarily ensconced in a condo, meticulously searching for their forever home, when they stumbled upon a charming 3-bedroom craftsman in Oak Ridge Heights. It possessed character, a beautifully renovated kitchen, and a price tag just beyond their comfortable reach. What they blissfully overlooked was that the motivated seller they so diligently negotiated with was, in fact, a property management company acting on behalf of an absentee investor. This investor, burdened by the complexities of long-distance landlordship, eventually offloaded the property directly to my firm, not to my parents. My company, in turn, offered the house as a rental, subtly escalating the down payment requirements until they far surpassed Claudia and Raymond's means. And so, my parents became tenants in what they genuinely believed was their eventual retirement haven. The rent was fair, the lease standard, and they were even granted a first right of refusal should the property ever re-enter the market. They had no cause, no inclination, to probe deeper into the true ownership behind the walls that sheltered them. 2 years after their lease began, a promotion landed on my desk, expanding my dominion to include direct oversight of the Northwest region. Within that region, a single property in Oak Ridge Heights caught my eye. The address. I recognized it instantly. Professional ethics shrieked for disclosure of this blatant conflict of interest. But a darker, more compelling personal curiosity overruled it. I remained silent. The discovery was like unearthing a loaded weapon in my own desk drawer. I harbored no immediate intent to fire it, but its very existence fundamentally altered my stance in every family interaction. When Claudia delivered her customary cutting remarks about my life choices, I'd visualized their lease renewal, humming silently in my system. When Raymond lauded Miranda's latest trivial accomplishment, oblivious to my own, I'd conjure images of their pending maintenance requests, queued up for my approval. The power was, for a time, theoretical, abstract, a potent comfort object I never truly expected to wield. Until that intervention dinner. Driving home that night, my hands gripped the steering wheel, trembling uncontrollably. The humiliation pressed down on my chest, an unbearable weight amplified by my own craven capitulation. I had nodded, agreed, as they meticulously vivisected my character, promised to improve, to be less problematic, to mold myself into their preconceived ideal. The entire agonizing narrative of my childhood had replayed in miniature, Miranda, forever golden, me, irrevocably tarnished. Everyone, without exception, united in their verdict of who deserved accolades and who merited correction. But somewhere around mile marker 47, the trembling ceased. The humiliation didn't dissipate, it solidified, calcifying into something colder, sharper, infinitely more purposeful. By the time my tires crunched into my apartment complex, a chilling clarity had settled. I wouldn't fight them conventionally, that had always been a futile endeavor. Instead, I would unveil precisely how problematic I could truly be, when I actually applied myself. For the next 12 months, I orchestrated my parents' housing from behind an impenetrable corporate veil. Every rent check they issued, every maintenance request they logged, flowed directly through my department, across my desk. During this period, I never abused the obvious power I held. I approved their legitimate requests, ensured their repairs were handled promptly, even quietly lobbied internally to keep their rent increases modest. Arguably, they received a superior standard of service than any stranger would have provided. But during this calculated neutrality, I observed my family with a chilling, clinical detachment. Holiday gatherings transformed into field research. I meticulously catalogued every exclusion, the private jokes I was never privy to, the vacation plans cemented without a glance at my calendar, the ubiquitous family group chat that somehow perpetually omitted my number. Miranda threw a birthday bash for her son, Garrett, at a trampoline park, inviting what felt like half the county. I learned of it from Aunt Sylvia, 3 days after the fact. When I finally cornered Miranda about the glaring omission, she dismissed it with a patronizing laugh. "Oh, it was just a kid's thing. I didn't think you'd want to come anyway. You've never seemed that interested in the children." The accusation, despite its casual cruelty, contained a bitter grain of truth. I wasn't particularly close to Garrett or Sienna, my nephew and niece. But my distance wasn't disinterest, it was a hardened shell of self-protection. Each attempt to forge a bond was invariably intercepted, redirected, the children whisked away by Miranda or Quentin, as if my presence were vaguely contagious. They treated me as an embarrassing anomaly, best kept at arm's length, and the children, innocent sponges, absorbed this unspoken message without ever understanding its toxic source. Claudia, of course, fanned the flames, constantly contrasting my tentative interactions with Miranda's effusive maternal warmth. "You could learn something from your sister," she'd declare, after some saccharine display of affection. "Children need to feel loved, not analyzed." As if my attempts to connect by asking Garrett about his favorite video games were some clinical sociological experiment. That pivotal night, driving home alone after my hollow promise to do better, the path forward finally materialized with brutal clarity. My position, I realized, could be weaponized for more than silent stewardship. The ensuing weeks felt like a meticulous performance of a role I'd never wanted, living someone else's saccharine life. I attended every family gathering, radiating forced cheerfulness. I showered Miranda's children with compliments, affirmed Claudia's every pronouncement, and feigned laughter at Raymond's painfully stale jokes. I became the daughter they had always sculpted in their minds, and they consumed my performance with voracious delight. Meanwhile, I documented everything. Their criticisms of me weren't isolated to that one dinner, they stretched back into the forgotten corners of my past. I unearthed old text messages from Claudia deeming me exhausting, emails from Miranda explaining my exclusion from events because my energy would ruin them. I meticulously compiled a chilling archive, every slight, every exclusion, every instance where I'd been scapegoated for problems I hadn't created. One evening, cross-legged on my living room floor, surrounded by a mosaic of printed emails and faded photographs, I constructed a damning timeline of family grievances. The exercise was intended to stoke the embers of my anger, to ward off any creeping doubt. Instead, a photograph from my high school graduation brought me to my knees, me, a solitary figure at the edge of the frame, Claudia's hand resting proprietarily on Miranda's shoulder, Raymond's gaze lost somewhere beyond the lens. No one was touching me. I dried my tears, and I kept working. The documentation wasn't just a collection of hurts. It was a revelation of deeply ingrained patterns, feelings I'd long internalized but never articulated. Miranda's transgressions were invariably softened, explained away, reframed as mere understandable circumstances. The time she totaled Raymond's car in college? She was under so much stress with finals. Her maxed-out credit card, discreetly settled by my parents? Young people make mistakes. Her first marriage, a fleeting 11-month affair ending in divorce? Unmentionable, simply a matter of incompatible personalities, never her fault. My own missteps, however, received no such charitable interpretation. A solitary B- on a report card signified a lack of application. A broken vase in childhood branded me as careless and destructive. My decision to pursue business administration over a creative path like Miranda's art history degree was evidence of my profound lack of imagination and depth. This grotesque double standard bled seamlessly into our adult lives. When Miranda resigned from her part-time gallery job to embrace full-time homemaking, Claudia lauded her unwavering dedication to family. Yet, when I toiled through 60-hour weeks, meticulously scaling the corporate ladder, that same mother mused aloud about my inability to achieve better work-life balance. Miranda's choice to cease working was lauded as strength. My choice to persist was diagnosed as dysfunction. I meticulously appended these observations to my growing documentation, meticulously assembling a case file for a trial only I would ever preside over. Grandma Edith's 80th birthday party became my magnum opus of performance art. I arrived early, orchestrating setups, coordinating caterers, ensuring every guest was served, every gift meticulously logged. By evening's end, even Aunt Sylvia, usually my harshest critic, conceded I'd been surprisingly helpful. It was during this carefully maintained charade that Grandma Edith, now 80 yet still possessing the keenest mind in the family despite age having softened her formidable edges, drew me aside. "You're playing a game with them," she murmured, her gaze unwavering. "I recognize that look. Your grandfather had it, sometimes." My denial was immediate, wrote. "I don't know what you mean, Grandma." She patted my hand, her touch surprisingly firm. I'm not judging, sweetheart. This family has never been kind to those who refuse their mold. Just be careful. Games have a way of spiraling beyond control. I offered a hollow assurance that I was merely striving for better family relations. She smiled, a knowing glint in her ancient eyes, acknowledging my lie yet respecting my right to tell it. With spring's arrival came the lease renewal season. My parents' 3-year term was set to expire in July. Standard procedure dictated sending renewal paperwork 90 days in advance, landing precisely in early April. On April 3rd, I took a personal day, driving 40 miles from my office to a nondescript coffee shop. There, cloaked by my work laptop and VPN, I accessed my parents' file. The property had indeed appreciated significantly since their move-in. Market rates for comparable homes in Oak Ridge Heights had surged by nearly 30%. Corporate policy, conveniently, encouraged bringing long-term tenants up to current market value upon renewal. I didn't need to manipulate anything. I simply allowed established policy to execute its cold, unforgiving work. The new monthly rent figure that materialized on their renewal notice represented a staggering increase of $718. It wasn't illegal, nor was it unusual in the current climate, but for retirees tethered to a fixed income, it was nothing short of devastating. 3 days later, Claudia's call came, her voice trembling with a vulnerability I had rarely witnessed. "Vivian," she pleaded, "you work in property management. Can you explain this? Is this normal?" "Unfortunately, yes," I replied, my tone carefully calibrated to sound sympathetic, professional. "The rental market has been brutal. Landlords everywhere are adjusting rates to reflect property values." "Have you tried negotiating?" she asked, clutching at straws. "Your father sent an email to the management company. They said the rate was firm." Of course it was. I had personally flagged their account as non-negotiable, inventing a fictitious internal policy regarding properties in high-demand neighborhoods. "I'm so sorry, Mom," I offered, my voice laced with feigned regret. "I wish there was something I could do." She thanked me for simply listening, then disconnected. I felt nothing. In the ensuing weeks, I watched my family's carefully constructed world unravel. Raymond and Claudia, reliant on their retirement income, simply couldn't absorb the new rent. Miranda, ever the performative savior, offered to help, but her own financial facade was crumbling. Quentin's inherited wealth had largely dissolved in a series of disastrous investments. The very real estate development company he was meant to helm quietly dismembered and sold off 2 years prior. My parents, trapped, frantically explored their dwindling options. Purchasing the home was impossible. Their credit, marred by recent medical bills and collections, precluded any mortgage. Finding another rental proved equally futile. The same market forces that had amplified their rent now inflated every comparable property. Relocating to a more affordable area meant abandoning their cherished social network, their church, the entire meticulously curated fabric of their lives. By June, Miranda, ever the organizer, convened another family meeting. This time, however, the agenda was raw, desperate, brainstorming solutions for our parents' escalating housing crisis. "What if they moved in with you?" Quentin ventured, his hopeful gaze fixed on Miranda, clearly anticipating her refusal. "We don't have the space," she shot back, her voice quick and sharp. "The kids each need their own rooms, and my home office is non-negotiable." All eyes then swung to me. "I have a 1-bedroom apartment," I stated flatly. "The couch pulls out, but it's hardly a long-term solution." Claudia, her composure finally shattered, wept openly. "We never should have sold the Colonial," she sobbed. "We had equity there. Stability." Raymond, his arm around her, offered a hollow reassurance. "We'll figure something out." "We always do." But they didn't. They never did. July 1st dawned. Finding my parents still in their cherished Craftsman, still bleeding money they couldn't afford, still draining the precious savings meant for their actual retirement. In August, I initiated my second strategic maneuver. As regional director, routine property inspections fell squarely within my purview. Most landlords mandated annual walkthroughs, assessing wear and tear, ensuring lease compliance, identifying maintenance issues, typically scheduled with ample notice and conducted with professional decorum. I scheduled my parents' inspection for August 15th, adhering to the legally mandated 72-hour notice. The official letter arrived from the management company, not from me personally. Yet it rattled them. "We've never had an inspection before," Claudia confided over the phone, her voice laced with unease. "What are they looking for? Are we in trouble?" "It's standard," I assured her, my voice a practice bomb. "Just ensure the smoke detectors work and the place is reasonably tidy. Nothing to worry about." The anticipated pang of guilt remained stubbornly absent. My conscience, it seemed, operated on a perverse delay, absorbing each calculated action without immediate reaction, warehousing the moral burden for later processing. In that moment, executing my plan felt clinical, almost sterile. I was simply performing my job, applying established procedures to a single property, just as I did for thousands across my portfolio. The intimate knowledge of these particular tenants felt, strangely, almost incidental. On the appointed inspection day, I dispatched a junior colleague, Derek, to conduct the walkthrough. I had deliberately selected him, knowing he was oblivious to my family ties and that his reputation for thoroughness bordered on the irritating. Derek's meticulous report landed on my desk 3 days later. He noted several minor issues: a slow drip from a bathroom faucet, a faint stain on a high-traffic carpet, a hairline crack in a window seal. Nothing warranted immediate action, certainly no penalties. But the report also highlighted an unauthorized modification. My parents had installed a modest 8x10 garden shed in the backyard, Raymond's cherished sanctuary for his tools, without seeking prior written approval from the management company. In virtually any other circumstance, such a minor infraction would result in a polite form letter, requesting either its removal or a retroactive application for approval. Nothing severe, nothing urgent. But I escalated it. My reasoning, meticulously documented in internal communications, hinged on liability concerns. The shed, I argued, lacked professional installation, its construction materials and foundation were undocumented. Should it collapse and injure someone, the property owner faced significant legal exposure. Better, I concluded, to address this formally than risk future complications. The letter my parents subsequently received granted them a terse 30 days, remove the shed, or face lease violation proceedings. Raymond's panicked call came. "They're saying we violated our lease over a garden shed I built with my own 2 hands," he choked out. "We could lose our home, Vivian." The word home, raw and broken, cracked his voice, and a faint tremor resonated deep within my chest. My father was not a man given to overt emotion. Hearing him so close to tears should have halted me in my tracks. It didn't. The emotional armor I had painstakingly forged around my intentions held fast. "Let me look into it," I offered, my voice a practiced blend of concern and competence. "Perhaps I can find someone at the company who can help." For 2 excruciating weeks, I performed the diligent advocate. I made calls that led nowhere, sent emails that were deliberately ignored. I presented myself to my parents as their tireless champion, all while meticulously ensuring every potential avenue of resolution remained hermetically sealed. The performance demanded unwavering attention to detail. I had to project genuine frustration at the bureaucratic obstacles I myself had erected. I rehearsed my tone in the bathroom mirror before every update call, perfecting the precise blend of earnest effort and inevitable futility. When Claudia thanked me for trying so hard, I accepted her gratitude with what I hoped was a convincing display of weary determination. Late at night, alone in my apartment, the sheer enormity of my deception sometimes threatened to overwhelm me. I'd lie awake, coldly calculating the stress I was inflicting, picturing my father's spiking blood pressure, my mother's tormented, sleepless nights. Yet these thoughts, these nascent stirrings of remorse, never translated into action. Remorse was confined to one meticulously sealed compartment of my mind. The plan continued unyielding from another. Ultimately, Raymond dismantled the shed himself. It consumed an entire weekend, A monumental effort that clearly taxed his 72-year-old body. Claudia sent me photos of the raw, empty patch of dirt where it had once stood. "Your father's heartbroken," she wrote. "He loved that shed. It was his space." The relentless pattern continued throughout the fall. A new policy arbitrarily limited overnight guests to 7 consecutive days, torpedoing my parents' plans to host Aunt Sylvia during her post-surgery recovery. A seemingly minor modification to the landscaping agreement now mandated professional-level yard maintenance, a simple task for younger tenants, an insurmountable challenge for seniors with limited mobility. Every single change I implemented was legal, meticulously defensible, and utterly crushing. By November, my parents' hard-won savings had evaporated into a cruel trickle. They slashed their food budget, canceled subscriptions, and postponed Raymond's essential dental work. The relentless stress etched itself onto their faces, slumped their postures, and infused their increasingly desperate phone calls to me, seeking advice I had no intention of honestly providing. During my visits, the physical changes became stark, undeniable. Claudia's silver hair, once meticulously coiffed at the salon every 6 weeks, now revealed telltale dark roots she could no longer afford to conceal. Raymond's wardrobe, though never fashionable, had always been impeccably neat. Now, his shirts bore the tired wear of clothes washed too many times without replacement. The house itself, while still meeting Lee's standards, began to acquire a subtle, aching neglect, small repairs deferred, decorations gradually thinning as cherished items were quietly sold off. One afternoon, stopping by unannounced, I found my mother hunched over the kitchen table, meticulously clipping coupons. Stacks of newspaper circulars, organized by store and expiration date, formed a desperate barricade around her. She looked up, a flush of embarrassment coloring her cheeks. "Just planning the grocery trip," she offered, as if such frugality demanded an explanation. I sat with her, helping sort for an hour. We didn't speak of why this had become necessary, of the exorbitant rent, the dismantled shed, or the endless barrage of policies eroding their lives. Instead, we discussed preferred brands, the best deals, the efficacy of generic medications versus name brand. For one fleeting hour, it was a perfectly normal mother-daughter conversation, stripped bare of all pretense. For that hour, I almost forgot the architect of her suffering. Thanksgiving arrived, ushering in another family gathering. This time, we convened at Miranda's house, my parents, too ashamed of their newly constrained circumstances, no longer felt they could host. The meal was a subdued affair. Gone was the smug confidence that had permeated family dinners since that brutal intervention 18 months prior. Miranda looked visibly tired. Quentin defeated. And my parents, they simply looked old, in a way that defied their actual years. After dessert, Raymond rose to offer a toast, his hands trembling faintly as he lifted his glass. "I want to thank everyone for being here," he began, his voice thick with emotion. "This has been a difficult year. Claudia and I have faced challenges we never anticipated, but family is what matters. Family is what endures." Then, his gaze, raw and direct, found mine. "Vivian, I want to apologize." The table fell into a stunned silence. "Last year at dinner, we said some things that weren't fair. We blamed you for problems that weren't your fault. I've been thinking about it constantly, watching everything fall apart around us, and I realized we were wrong. You've been the one person truly trying to help us through this housing nightmare. You've answered every panicked phone call. You've researched options we wouldn't have found on our own. You've been a good daughter, and we haven't always been good parents to you." Claudia, tears openly flowing now, dabbed at her eyes with a napkin. "We're so sorry, sweetheart." For one infinitesimal, flickering moment, a chink appeared in my armor. The apology was undeniably genuine. My parents were suffering, and I was the architect of that suffering. The anticipated satisfaction of watching their lives crumble now tasted metallic and bitter on my tongue. The table held its collective breath, awaiting my response. Miranda's eyes glistened with unshed tears. Quentin, out of his depth in a moment of raw, authentic family emotion, shifted uncomfortably. Even Aunt Sylvia, a silent accomplice in my initial condemnation, offered a gentle, encouraging nod. A dozen futures shimmered before me. I could confess everything, surrender to their mercy, embark on years of arduous trust rebuilding. I could press my campaign, relentlessly, until they had nothing left. I could simply vanish, relocate to another city, letting the debris settle without my further involvement. But then, the memories surged. Every Christmas where Miranda's gifts eclipsed mine, every family photograph where I stood at the periphery, an accidental inclusion, that searing dinner where they branded me the problem and every head around the table nodded in agreement. I smiled warmly, a mask of perfect reconciliation, and accepted their apology. The fragile moment passed. Dinner resumed. Miranda's homemade pumpkin pie, conspicuously ordered from a bakery, was served. No one challenged her claim. I ate my slice, offering appreciative noises, effortlessly playing the role of the cherished, reconciled daughter. December delivered the ultimate blow. Property tax assessments in our county had soared, mirroring the same market appreciation that had fueled their rental increases. My company's ownership group, sensing an opportunity, decided to divest several properties in the Northwest region, the Craftsman and Oak Ridge Heights among them. My parents' home was slated for the market in January. Standard procedure mandated notifying tenants of an impending sale, while simultaneously honoring existing lease terms. Eviction solely due to a change of ownership was prohibited. Their current lease extended through June. They had time. What they lacked, critically, was money. Purchasing the home demanded a down payment and mortgage qualification they simply couldn't achieve. Remaining as tenants meant eventually succumbing to whatever terms a new owner might impose. Leaving meant facing a rental market even more brutal than before. I drafted the sale notification letter myself, meticulously choosing language that sounded both sympathetic and devastatingly final. The letter was dispatched on December 10th. Claudia's call came, her voice a raw, broken sob. "They're selling our house, Vivian! After everything we've been through, the increases, the inspections, the rules, now they're just selling it out from under us. I'm so sorry, Mom." The words now flowed effortlessly, a well-worn script. "Can't you do anything? You work for a property management company. Don't you have connections? Isn't there someone who can help?" "I've tried, Mom. I've done everything I can." Christmas that year was a hushed affair. My parents exchanged token gifts they clearly couldn't afford. Miranda presented a ham she'd found on sale. Even the children, attuned to the suffocating tension that had become our family's permanent atmosphere, seemed subdued. On December 27th, Grandma Edith called me privately. Her voice, despite her age, was startlingly steady. "You did this," she stated, not as an accusation, but as a chilling, undeniable fact. "Did what, Grandma?" My voice was thin. "The housing problems, the inspections, the shed, all of it. You work for the company that owns their house, don't you?" I offered no reply. "I warned you, Vivian," she continued, her voice gaining strength. "Games have a way of getting out of control. Your parents are discussing moving to that retirement community in Montana, the cheap one. Your grandfather and I looked at places like that before he died. They're where dreams go to wither. They blame me for everything wrong with this family," I retorted, my own hurt resurfacing. "They were wrong. Being wrong," she countered, "doesn't make wrong right. You don't understand what it's like being the scapegoat." "I understand perfectly," I insisted, a bitter laugh escaping me. "My own mother favored my brother until the day she died. I could have destroyed him a dozen times over. I had opportunities, believe me. I chose not to take them. Some prices are too high, even for justice." I hung up without a goodbye. January brought the inevitable. My parents' home was listed. The asking price, a brutal reflection of current market conditions, soared far beyond Raymond and Claudia's means, indeed, beyond what most middle-class families in the area could even dream of. Open houses became a parade of indifferent young professionals, eager investors, and cold-eyed speculators. My parents, hollow-eyed, offered awkward smiles to strangers who critiqued their living room. The house sold in February to a software engineer relocating from California. The new owner, impatient for possession, desired occupancy by April, 3 months before my parents' lease officially expired in July. She offered a $4,000 buyout for an early vacation. They took the money. They had no other recourse. In March they moved. Not to Miranda's house, she still didn't have room. Not to mine. My one-bedroom suddenly felt like an inadequate, almost contemptible excuse. They rented a small, nondescript apartment in a less desirable neighborhood, 30 minutes away. The complex was notorious for its thin walls, its perpetually overflowing parking lot, and the insidious, lingering smell of mildew that clung to the hallways. Moving day dawned under a sky as gray and drizzling as the occasion's somber mood. A rented truck, its back doors yawning like an empty maw, sat in the driveway of the craftsman, ready to swallow a lifetime of accumulated possessions. Raymond, forcing a cheerfulness that barely masked his despair, directed the movers, pointing to boxes labeled in Claudia's meticulously careful handwriting. I helped them, lifting boxes, assembling particle board furniture, pretending that this dismal exodus wasn't precisely what I had engineered. Their new apartment, a second-floor unit in a building erected in the 1970s and minimally maintained since, was a testament to neglect. Carpets bore the indelible stains of previous tenants. Windows faced a ceaseless parking lot, where bass-heavy music throbbed from passing cars at all hours. The kitchen featured appliances that merely functioned, inspiring no confidence, their yellowed surfaces bearing the patina of decades of indifferent use. Claudia, ever the optimist, attempted a positive spin. "It's cozy," she declared, surveying a living room that couldn't quite accommodate all their furniture, a temporary stopgap in a life irrevocably altered. "We'll find something better once we get back on our feet." Raymond said nothing. He stood by the window, staring out at the asphalt expanse, his shoulders slumped in a posture I had never witnessed before. My father had always exuded a quiet dignity, a man comfortable and assured in his place in the world. That man, I realized with a jolt, had vanished, replaced by someone smaller, older, utterly defeated. My father thanked me for simply being there. My mother hugged me, her voice choked, and told me I was the only one they could count on. The satisfaction I had so eagerly anticipated never materialized. Instead, what arrived was a phone call from Derek, my junior colleague, in April. "Hey," he began, his voice casual but with an undercurrent. "I was cleaning out old files and found something weird. That property in Oak Ridge Heights, the one with the garden shed violation, the tenant's last name was the same as yours. And their emergency contact was listed as Vivian, phone number ending in your extension." My stomach plummeted. "Coincidence? Common name?" I stammered. "Maybe," he conceded. "But I also noticed you flagged their account as non-negotiable during renewal season. And you personally escalated the shed issue. And you drafted the sale notification letter instead of letting the admin team handle it. What are you suggesting?" I demanded, my voice tight. "Nothing," he replied smoothly. "Just found it interesting." He hung up. I spent the rest of the day in a cold sweat, waiting for the inevitable call from HR that never came. Derek, it seemed, kept his observations to himself, but his words echoed in my mind for weeks. He had seen the pattern. And if he had, others might too. My meticulously careful game had, after all, left insidious traces I hadn't anticipated. Mother's Day fell on a rainy Sunday. I visited my parents' cramped, dim, wrong apartment with flowers and a card. Raymond sat in a recliner, the television volume too loud, his gaze blank. Claudia made tea in a kitchen barely large enough for one person to turn around. We spoke of inconsequential things, the weather, a show Miranda's children were watching, Grandma Edith's slowly declining health. It was normal family conversation, stripped of the pretense that had once inflated our gatherings. "I miss the house," Claudia confessed, her voice thin, eventually. "I miss my garden. I miss having space to breathe." "I know, Mom," I whispered. "Sometimes I wonder if we did something to deserve this." She mused, her eyes distant. If God was punishing us for something. You didn't deserve this, I said, the words feeling utterly hollow, because I knew the truth. They hadn't deserved this. Not entirely. They had been thoughtless, cruel in the casual, ingrained way families often are, all too willing to make me their perpetual scapegoat. But they hadn't deserved to lose their home, their security, their peace. I had made myself the very problem they accused me of being. And in my ruthless pursuit of solace from my own pain, I had inflicted wounds that, I now understood, would never truly heal. The drive home that day took longer than usual. I had to pull over twice, my vision blurred by an endless, silent torrent of tears. In June, I submitted my resignation from the property management company. My supervisor, seemingly surprised, asked no probing questions. I cited burnout, which, I realized, was not entirely a lie. I spent the summer job hunting, processing, trying desperately to understand who I had become. The righteous anger that had fueled my calculated campaign against my parents had, at last, burned itself out, leaving behind nothing but cold ash and crushing regret.